Good afternoon. I'm here on Poet to Poet, Writer to Writer with my guest, Ifeanyi Menkiti. Menkiti is a Somerville resident. That's where we're broadcast from. And he, last time I interviewed him was about 10 years ago when he took over the famed Grolier Poetry Bookshop from Louisa Solano. And originally was owned by Gordon Carney, right?
Yes. Okay.
And since then, he has retired from a distinguished career as a philosophy professor at Wellesley University, and has continued to write poetry and publish collections of his work. I never really asked you about your work in philosophy, but I noticed that you taught moral philosophy. Perhaps you could just give us a little layman's view of what that is.
Well, I taught courses in the area of moral philosophy at Wellesley College, and when I finished my graduate work at Harvard, I studied under John Rawls, who was my thesis advisor. Studied at Wellesley back in '73, and then retired in 2014. So it's the area of moral, social, political philosophy. That's where I did most of my teaching. Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. I was interested in the issues of the world and how we try to get interests of individuals in alignment with each other. There's a particular, I've always found that there's a kind of a symmetrical aesthetic issue when you can get whole bunches of people born under different stars, each person with their own game, and yet be able to align these together and have things work peacefully. I thought there was always an aesthetic element to this. So people sometimes ask me, what is the relationship between your teaching in philosophy and your poetry? As in poetry, we try to get words in alignment, the things seem just right, and the music flows. I think the same thing in human relations and politics, when done properly, I think...
Where does the moral come in, though?
The issue of what is it? Laws are different in different places. The legal system cannot bind everything under one rubric. With morality, there's a sense of a universal claim. You don't say, well, I beat up on that guy because they came from Yugoslavia or from Kathmandu. There's a sense in which, as individuals, we all claim a certain dignity before the whole world. So morality doesn't make that kind of regional exceptions. Laws can, Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you took over the Grolier Poetry Bookshop in Harvard Square, very famous bookshop. All the greats have been there. Mm-hmm. And you had a goal of building up its collection, its international, poetry collection. Have you succeeded, you feel, in the time?
Well, it's an ongoing job. We have done a lot with, we had a big conference showcasing, together with Harvard and BU and UMass, the poetry of Christopher Okibo, the Nigerian, absolutely brilliant Nigerian poet who died during the Civil War. And then, of course, we've tried to get hosted a lot of readers, poets from Ireland, from, Poland, from some Chinese poets, and also folks from Malaysia. So we're trying to broaden the base so that we can have people hear these sounds and have these authors who have been here, or maybe they're at home. We get a lot of inquiries from Australia. Interestingly enough, a young man wrote us and said, can we send him some books from Ghana in high school? And then I got that young kid from Newton North High School who came to the store and sat there for hours reading, chuckling, Didn't buy much because she didn't have money. And yet when she left, I felt very good. I said, this is what this is supposed to be. Maybe when she's 70 years old, the thing has stuck. You feel good about it. So we're trying to broaden our operations to include, Louisa was doing some of this, and then of course Gordon himself came from Canada. So the international spirit continues, and the guy who is working on this book is in Germany. So we hope to bring the world together as much as possible.
Now, what can you remember your first experience at the Grolier Poetry Bookstore?
Wow. I think
was that when you went to Harvard?
Yeah, well, when I came here in '68, '69, and I met Gordon Carney, who was the founder of the store. Actually, we gave some readings for him in '72 back in Inman Square. Denise Levertov was there, and
she lived in Somerville.
She lived in Somerville, Aram Saroyan. So we gave a reading to help raise some money for for him. So Gordon was a very interesting guy. Remember meeting him? I don't know.
Steve did. Steve Lyons, a friend, did. He said he was. And Louisa told me about it.
Yeah, he's a very interesting guy. But I think sometimes people have this sense of Gordon as being very, not very friendly. But he was really, I think he was a good guy inside, very friendly. But he just didn't have all these young Harvard students coming in and then taking up his time. And they may not be interested in poetry, really, So, but it was very, I thought he had a wonderful vision to.
How many years did he run it till?
The store was opened in 1927, and then he died in the 70s. And Louisa came in as a 15-year-old to volunteer, and then eventually worked and then scrapped up some money to buy the store from his estate. So the store has had only 3 owners in almost 100 years. Gordon, Louisa, and then I
took over. Does it have a formal relationship with Harvard?
Not really. We pay rent to Harvard University. They own the building.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's a tiny little space, but a lot of history.
They give you a deal.
A lot of history. Just a small space, but a lot of history. All these famous poets, Lowell.
What famous poets have traversed the portals of the Grolier?
Well,
recently.
More recently.
Under your tenure here.
Well, we've had Vera Pavlova has read for us, Robert Pinsky, and David Ferry. Then
I read for you.
You read? That's very true. That's why you keep a lot of things going, dog.
Yeah, there you go.
It's true. There's a lot of labor being done for poetry, and there's a lot of it is just.
But who else has read for you?
Well, as I said, Robert Pinsky, Frank Bidat, Dan Chiesin, and David, of course, and then Dana Joya, Pavlova. I can, X.J. Kennedy. So there's I can't even remember. There's a lot of Maxine Cumming. Read. Maxine Cumming has read for us, and then we had a young woman who won the Yale series, and
younger poet series.
Yeah, Louis Gluck came and introduced, and was very nice. So we've had a number of interesting people. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, you originally, I read that you wanted to be a journalist. What changed your mind on that?
Well,
you went to Columbia for journalism?
I did, but that was not actually what. You see, what happened was I was a Pomona, and I was always interested in writing. And then I did major in philosophy and literature, wrote my bachelor's thesis on Ezra Pound, got an award for that. And I wanted to continue with philosophy, but the funding was not quite there. So this program at Columbia came up, and everything was all set. So it was a year, 18 months. So I just took it up, and by the time I finished, some of the money came through to continue with the philosophy. I'd always wanted to go do my PhD in philosophy. One other interesting thing was that at Columbia, there was a lot of emphasis on reportage,
On what?
On reportage. People report news. Yeah, I was interested in in-depth writing, the kind of article you might find in the, in Atlantic Monthly or New Yorker, in-depth kind of writing.
Yeah.
That was really what I was more interested in. And I was a man on the slow lane for daily.
Did you write were you a journalist for any publications?
No, I didn't really do that, But I did, when I was at Columbia, I did interview Malcolm X.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about that.
Oh, it was a wonderful man. The man was extremely
Was he more in his phase of being a little less confrontive? He was sort of...
Well, what I thought about Malcolm X was that this man was extremely dignified. Once you met him, all that talk about this firebrand that wants to burn down everything, that was not the impression I got.
But later on, he was more... she started out a little more
radical. But even when you met him, too, there was a certain dignity about the man, even in those days, And then you think about, Muhammad Ali just died, and then he was supposed to be instrumental in getting him into the Nation of Islam. But I can kind of see what might have attracted Muhammad, because the man was extremely intelligent, So then the religion and the Nation of Islam, those were factors that complicated his life, and also for good or bad, But
now,
then later on,
who were you interviewing for?
Well, it was one of those things that we had an assignment. He had a storefront in Harlem, and I was supposed to go do this assignment, and it was a very...
Oh, for class, right?
Yeah, no, yeah. But it was a wonderful thing because then subsequently, before he died, he was out there he gave a speech.
Was this before he was killed at the ballroom?
Before he was killed, yeah.
Yeah,
no, but that was...
of course, it wouldn't be after.
Yeah, my interview was earlier.
Yeah.
But then, before he was killed, he gave a speech in Midtown Manhattan. And I went to hear that. And then when the speech was over, we're on the sidewalk. By then, all sorts of threats were being made against his life. And so when he remembered that I had this young man from Africa had interviewed him, so he came out and his bodyguards were very nervous. He kind of waved them aside. And then we stood there talking. And then I knew he was going to make this speech again. I was very much interested in what he had to say. Then, of course, they killed him. I didn't go to
Do you still have the interview?
I didn't go to the Audubon Ballroom. Yeah,
No.
yeah. I don't know if I have the tape of the one that I did with him at the storefront.
That's too bad.
Yeah, I know, but I did.
What did he talk about, basically?
Well, he was very much interested in the new countries of Africa. The question of the independence of the African countries, and he was very much interested in young Africans who, he felt were to be encouraged. So there was the falling out with the Nation of Islam, and then that all we know. We all know that from history. Yeah, but the one thing that really struck me about the guy was in how smart and how intelligent and how dignified he was. You don't usually hear this. Yeah. But so anyway, I talked to him in the sidewalk, waved the bodyguards away because they were worried. Who was this guy, Yeah. But then we chatted a little bit, and then he was going to talk about a couple of weeks later on at the Audubon Ballroom. I thought if I had time from my classes, I might then go.
He sort of knew he was going to be...
yeah, there was a lot of threats against his life now. Yeah, it was... anyway.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Now, you did an award-winning thesis, as you mentioned, on Pound.
Yes.
He was an imagist, right?
Well...
Wasn't he part of that school?
Well, yeah, part of that, but he also he did a lot of things. What I loved about Pound was his engagement with history.
Okay.
Yeah, it was engagement with history.
He didn't like his part as a Nazi supporter.
Fascist. There was also, it's a very interesting issue because there was an interview, I guess, when Allen Ginsberg met him, and there was a very tragic fellow. How has it come to be that I lost my center fighting the world? So he knew that all that thing about social credit and usury, that something was it's happening. And I don't think I don't think Eliot actually had that awareness. Eliot he had his own issues with anti-Semitism, but nobody actually talks about that. But at Pound, there was a certain level, Pound was aware that something was not quite right, and then of course
with him.
Towards the end, that something.
Yeah, well, he was in St. Elizabeth's, right?
Yeah, but even before then, because one of the lines of the poems, how it has come to be that I lost my center fighting the world.
So he realized.
Like a lone ant from a broken anthill from the wreckage of Europe, ego scripto, I write. So it's a very, 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 very sad
right.
Sad situation.
But you always have to separate the artist from
the... But I think that his problems, the bombastic... Eliot, I don't know, I don't want to get into this, but Eliot's anti-Semitism was a little bit more insidious, I think, than Pound. But Pound is the one that is known, but, he was already the Old Testament prophets, he was already... latched onto some of these wonderful figures with moral insight. Then came this battle that he got into necessarily, and then the more he fought, the more he got
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know.
Have you ever met? You didn't meet him, did you?
Well, I didn't meet Pound, but George Quasha got some poems from James Laughlin, at New Direction. And so in one of the last poems he published in the Stony Brook Review, I had a poem in there. So here's the guy that I wrote my thesis on towards the end. His last poem that came out in magazines, I had a poem that George took that came out in the same issue of Stony Brook. As Pound.
And Pound was in there too.
Yeah, because James Laughlin gave George Quasha, who was the editor of this last huge, before the New Directions brought them out in a book. So George published the poems in Stony Brook.
Stony Brook.
He taught at Stony Brook.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
He published it in
a journal, Stony Brook Annual, and I had a poem in there. So it was, and I never met him, so I just met him through that little funny coincidence. And then,
you must have been thrilled.
Oh, I was thrilled. And then when I met James Laughlin later on, he asked me to edit an issue of New Directions 39. Which was also one of the interesting things.
So what was James Laughlin like in the New
Directions? Oh, he was a great guy. He was very much an interesting. I went to a meeting. He was there. Norman Podhoretz was there. And during the discussions, I mentioned something in passing about Pound. So during the intermission, at the break when we had coffee, he came to me and said, look, I'm Mr. Laughlin, I'm Pound's publisher. And so that's how we connected. And
he was a great independent publisher like Grove Press and the other presses.
They started the press and became Pound's publisher and encouraged, Pound told him, go into publishing. He left his poetry writing alone. And so Laughlin asked me to guest edit New Directions 39.
And that's, I guess,
New Directions 39.
What did he ask you to do?
To guest edit.
Guest edit.
Yeah. So there's the New Directions Annual. They used to do one issue a year where they bring a lot of poetry together. So I guest edited at the request of James Laughlin, Who
was in that issue that you guest edited?
Oh, I had a bunch of African writers, we published some of Okibo's stuff, and then a bunch of, they kind of devoted the issue to some African new.
Do you think African poetry is getting enough play in the West? I mean,
well, I think it should get more play. I really think so, because there's a lot of wonderful things that's happening. Part of it is also the idiom. In the early days, people wrote a certain way, but the more modernist kind of temperament that Okibo was really into it, where you can take on the traditional imagery, but do it in a way that it has echoes of what's going on poetry-wise in the rest of the world. Okibo was good at that. And so it's happening. There's a lot of creativity. There's a lot of fiction writers in Africa, Chimamanda, Adichie, Half of a Yellow Sun,
I mean, Nigeria is a very troubled country. They feel the writers are under a lot of stress. I
know. Well, of course, there's the tradition that Chinua Achebe and Wole Soyinka, who got the Nobel Prize in Literature back in '87, and then Christopher Okibo. Interestingly enough, Chinua, Wole Soyinka, and Okibo were all students at Ibadan, at the University of Ibadan at the same time.
University of what?
At the University of Ibadan, Ibadan in Nigeria. So all three guys were at Ibadan. They were friends at university in Nigeria at the same time. Chinua went on with, fiction. Things Fall Apart, we know him very well from that. Wole Soyinka in drama, got the Nobel Prize in '87, and then Christopher Okibo, this absolutely brilliant young poet that died during the Civil War in Nigeria. That's the one I mentioned when we...
Now, you also have, I want to give you some time also for your reading your poetry, but it's such a fascinating study. You also have the Grolier Poetry Publishing.
Yes,
Tell me how that started.
Well, I was interested in trying to see if we can do the culture work of the Grolier is not just your regular shop. If you had a shop selling potatoes, if things are not going well, you can close down and go. But it's not the same thing with the Grolier. There's the business sales part of it, and there's also the culture part of it. And there's a lot of goodwill out there. People really want to see this place going. So I went into it trying to keep this culture is really like a labor of love, really. That word has been used so many times, but it's really true. That's why you invest this energy and this resource.
Who have you published? I know Thomas, a friend of ours, Thomas O'Leary.
Yeah, no, we did Thomas under the Laura imprint. What we have is to the Discovery Award, where we did Kit O'Shaughnessy Incommunicado, and we did Patrick Boswell,
And Tino Villanova.
Well, Tino is there are two series. One is the Discovery Award and the Established Poets series. So Tino Villanueva came out in the Established Poets series. We did Ellery Street by David Ferry under some arrangement with the University of Chicago Press, and then we did X.J. Kennedy and then Masterson.
Yeah.
These were under the Established Poet series.
I interviewed X.J. Kennedy and his wife here.
Yes, he's a wonderful guy. Feats of Constitution.
Very unaffected also.
But Tino's book is doing fine.
Tino is a bagel bard.
Yeah. So spoke Penelope. The Spanish translation came out of this book that we brought out. It won a prize in Spain. The Italian translation is coming out, and the German translation is going to be coming out. 3 in a few years. So it's a beautiful book.
And he's a beautiful man.
A beautiful guy.
Just like
because what I really loved about it was he is the son of the South, this iconic woman from literature, huh? The North and the South together, the male, female, to inhabit the voice of this woman. And then, and then the past and the present. I love poetry that brings the world together. Yeah.
Well, you have about 8 minutes now to read from your work. So let's hear it.
Oh, well, let me see what I can do in 8 minutes.
You're one of the rare people. No, I shouldn't say rare, but you do. Not many. Do a lot for poets and also write poetry.
Yeah. This will probably take 10 minutes. So I should leave this one alone because it's going to take us about 10 minutes to do this. This is the Voltaire, The Bright Light, that came out in 2005. The opening poem said the very last end of it, the last segment of that. I should read this. It's called, from the long poem that opens the book, Mutatis Mutandis. A bow that is tightly drawn, and in the chest of the horseman drawing the bow, a tightness he did not know was there. And you ask, what is the measure of our aims, the acts that our aims accomplish, or the thing inside each of us that is the source of our aimings? A man may be a woman who does not have an answer to this question. It is all right for the man or woman not to have an answer to the question. It is all right for the man or woman to still lay claim to the world. And as to your question, why poets feel they can say the same thing 2 different ways, let it be remembered that this is a question it is not legitimate to ask, though some may find legitimacy in the asking of it. And where the earth as you suppose to fall out of its orbit, there will be no place for it to hide. For the space between the walls, it is there for all to see. The world in its mystery swirling can only hide so much from both of us. A sun which is not our neighbor, but another which our neighbor is, and who knows what light each from the other casts. Is this then the basis of our genuflections, the basis of our walking proud? Maybe the basis is not for you or for me to decipher, but for you and for me to remember not to forget. An old man from Africa praying, may speech not choke us, but be our companion now and in the future. And so a toast to Altair, the bright light in the body of Aquila the eagle. To Deneb, the tall light in signals the swan. Regulus and Arcturus, they are guarding their homes. Milosevic of Serbia, he too was guarding his home. He too was wearing some panzer boots. Call home all you who are troubled, you will find more trouble there. The earth is where we live. The earth, it is the one place we may call home. And this poem kind of leads naturally to the title poem of my last book called Before a Common Soil, which I've read in several places, including the Dylan Thomas Boathouse in Swansea, Wales, and also at his birthplace on Cumduncan Drive. The Plea for the World, Before a Common Soil. Very short poem.
Okay.
Yeah. Let this then be your understanding, you sons and daughters of the ancient stars, that your home reaches beyond the earth, which is your home. May you go forth across the land, and with the movement of flutes, celebrate the blessings which the gods have given you. May you catch the shifting of the light at the tip of the flute's tongue, and may you ask of the darkness that it remain with you, lest the light lose sight of whence it came. Oh yes, I have heard sung the power of which was not of the world, though the singer of it was in the world. And I have called out to you, children of an undivided earth, that you join your hands together and be of one accord before a common soil, lest the rivers cease to water the land, lest the voices of the singers be forever stilled. Oh yes, I have heard sung the power of which was not of the world, though the singer of it was in the world. So these are the two poems. The poem that we can try to use the spirit of poetry to bring the world together. That's the great job, you know. And, but it starts from the heart. It starts from mutual appreciation of each other's cultures and each other's needs, you know. So
sorely needed now with all the divisiveness.
yeah, poetry can help. I think poetry can help us move this along. Somebody said that after 9/11, people didn't ask what novel to read, but what poems they could read. So in times of joy and difficulty and pain, people come back to poetry. Yeah, it is these words that sometimes say, "What is all what?" No, it's an spirit. You know that as a poet, you know. Yeah. So we got to keep pushing. Yeah, the earth is where we live. One place we may call home. All these tribalisms, you know.
You have another one for us?
Well, you know, I think
one more.
maybe I can find a short one. I was going to read a longer poem, but you know, the one thing that I wanted to do was to you know, going back to to Onitsha, where I was born at
Nigeria.
To Nigeria, Onitsha, yeah. It's really, we wouldn't have time to finish this thing, but there was a wonderful, I wanted to make sure, okay, I just want to sound some Igbo words here, okay?
You got about 2 minutes.
2 minutes, yeah. And that when, this is I'm going inside the poem, just a few lines here. That when we are born, there comes a time when we see the end of our earthly days. But that some among us, when they